Hey, good morning and welcome. Patriot Radio News Hour. I'm Joe Jaquin, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group, and our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. My lovely wife, Sarah, is here today. Arlene's on vacation. Wendy's off. Sarah's covering for us. I asked her if she wanted to come on the air. She said no thanks, so maybe next time. The website at allamericangold.com, and how you doing? We had so many things happening over the last couple of days that we'll get to. One of the big things, GNC. My wife actually told me about it. I hadn't seen anything about it, but you know, GNC, it's the vitamin store, right? For lack of a better term. My wife said to me yesterday while I was off, we went to the mall. I was telling the story the last hour. We went to PV Mall here in Arizona, and this is a mall. It's been emptying out. Like the last time I was in it, it was probably, 40, maybe 50% empty. We went in it yesterday. It's like 80% empty. I mean, it's incredible how many stores have gone. But GNC now saying that it is going to close 900 locations. I don't know, is that all of them? They said decreased traffic at mall locations out of GNC's 800 current mall locations. The company said that they're going to keep 500 of those are going to close. They got 4,000 locations. So they're closing 25% of their stores, just under 25%. So of the 4,000 GNC stores, 900 more are closing. And I just saw this, Barney, not the purple dinosaur, but the high-end retailer, if you will. Looks like they've just hired bankruptcy lawyers as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if JCPenney's is getting ready to file bankruptcy again. They've denied it, but the lawyers and people that they've brought in, this advisory committee, a lot of them with bankruptcy financing experience as the gutting of the old American mall continues out there. And I saw it firsthand. Like I said, in not a bad area. That's the thing. Like some of these malls I get, like Metro Center out here, that area is a little rough. Maybe that makes sense if that mall was struggling. But PV Mall is still a pretty good part of town. Empty. And, I mean, they could pretty much take a bulldozer to that thing. That's probably what's going to happen. They'll take a bulldozer, and I'm sure we'll get condos or apartment buildings or something like that. Today we had the ECB out, so the European Central Bank, right? It's kind of like central bank time. So they were out today, right? Our meeting's next week. So next Wednesday, we're supposed to get this in what they're calling the insurance rate cut is supposed to be coming. People weren't thrilled with the ECB today. Very, very dovish. But not quite dovish enough. They didn't cut rates this time. They're setting up for a big rate cut in September, and they were calling for more QE. Also saying to their governments that make up the EU, you got to spend more money. But still not quite dovish enough. Gold's down 5. The Dow's down 130 points. Even silver's off a little to another. By the way, what a great year it's been for both gold and now silver, showing signs of life here. And I think we're just getting started. We got GDP coming up tomorrow. Now, last year, this quarter was the high water mark. Right, the Trump tax cuts and all that stuff had a 4.2% GDP number. Right now, everybody's expecting something between 1.2 and, say, 2.4. The Atlanta GDP forecaster, they just updated it just updated it about 40 minutes ago. They're down to 1.3. 1.3. I don't know where it kind of looks like. Not kind of. It looks like this number is going to be below 2%. I'll give you all the details. We had GDP out today. The housing data and the GDP data. We had existing home sales on Tuesday, which we talked about, right, way down. We had new home sales yesterday, which I'll tell you what that one looked like. And then the GDP number today, the big theme in these numbers was they went back into May. These were June numbers, by the way. They went back into May. They went back into April, and they revised everything lower. So home sales, which hasn't been great, got revised even lower. GDP, durable goods, which hasn't been great, revised even lower, which got everybody kind of lowering GDP expectations, which sets up for that Fed rate cut. We'll be back right after the break. $800-951-0592. So we had economic data out today. Durable goods came out, and this was a very interesting number. The headline number was up 2%, which at first, when I see the headline, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a better number than I thought, especially considering what we've been seeing out of the manufacturers and most of what we've been seeing all the things we're hearing out of Boeing. Wow. That's another one. We'll talk about Boeing here in a minute, but that was the largest loss. They reported while I was gone, the largest loss ever for Boeing. Issues with the plane, and doesn't look like they're having any luck in figuring out this software issue. I'll say this: they outsourced it to India. The writing of that software, $9 an hour they paid, and you know what? You get what you pay for. But anyway. The headline number came out, and I was like, wow, that's a good number. And then you read the details. They actually went back to May and April and just whacked it. May, they took a full point off of May, took a half a point off of April as well. And so the GDP number, without those adjustments, would have been obviously much, much lower, which is what I would have expected. So the markets were a little disappointed in that because they went into business investment and some of this other stuff and made big adjustments in May and in April. And then new home sales. So I told you existing home sales, bad number. New home sales, the headline said up, but again, same thing. They went into May and April and just, whacked the home sales. So June, even though it was up, it was still way below expectation. And now the Atlanta Fed GDP tracker on July 25th, they said it was going to be 1.6. So we're getting ready for the GDP number tomorrow. Today, they updated it. And based upon the new data that's come in since the 25th, they've revised it even lower now to 1.3%, and all kinds of different factors in play here. But if we get a number close to 1, I'll be surprised, right? That means things are, and again, we have that thing where it's a weird economy, right? Let's call it what it is. It's weird, right? We're sitting here spending, really we're sitting here spending 1.6, 1.7 trillion more than we're taking in, and we're talking about a slowing economy, and we're talking about, hey, we're going to go from 4.2 second quarter last year to 1 point something this year, and now part of it, see, and they always do this, by the way, I got to throw this in there. All of this stuff seasonally adjusted. All of it seasonally adjusted. And when you look at seasonal adjustments, part of the reason that this number is going to be extra low is because of the adjustment they were making remember the first quarter, they said 3.1, and I told you it really wasn't 3.1. It was more like 2%. We're going to it's going to come back here in the second quarter, and we'll take a look at it. But trade deficit number, $74 billion was the trade deficit this month. Or, well, I guess the June number, $74 billion more dollars leaving the United States than coming into the United States. And of course, that has a negative effect on growth. And this is one of the things that bothers me. We're talking about the Chinese trade deal, which we got to hold our ground. I'm all in favor of getting the other $300 billion, but that looks like since remember I played that clip. Kramer said, "Hey, the $300 billion can come at any time." In the one day that I was off, they're now talking about, hey, it's going to take a little longer, and it looks like that's off the table. I don't know, but I guess we're going to fly over there next week again and all that stuff. But when's enough? When you're talking about actual goods, if you take away the banking stuff, we're talking about we're closing in on $1 trillion a year leaving the United States. And people acting like that's not a big thing or that's not a big deal. And of course, it's going to have a negative effect again. And it does every quarter, right? Trade deficit numbers always have an effect. But, of course, remember, they seasonally adjust it now so they can minimize all these effects of all this wealth leaving the United States. But you think about, we got a $1.7 trillion deficit. We buy $1 trillion more worth of stuff from everybody else than they actually buy from us. And, of course, let's face it, right? We got to invest in these companies because they're quote-unquote, these American multinationals that build everything somewhere else. And I just think that as we watch all of these things play out, it's very obvious where we're headed. None of this is payable. Everybody knows it. I was watching the head of the ECB coming out talking about, hey, we're going to give rate cuts. We're even talking about more quantitative easing. Maybe we'll start buying stocks even, right? Everybody's got to spend a bunch of money. Nobody here talks about, forget about balanced budgets. We don't even have offsets. We just had an agreement to raise the debt ceiling, right? We don't do it by a number anymore. Instead, we just set it for years, right? We'll talk about it a couple more years. What's another $4 trillion, right? We'll deal with it later. And by the way, to get that done, right, just to raise the debt ceiling, what did we agree to do? We'll agree to raise it if we spend even more money. I mean, it makes actually no sense. We were supposed to have the debt ceilings. We're supposed to tell Congress, hey, listen, guys, maybe we need to talk about spending a little less money. Instead, what happens now is the only way this, and it's a new trend. But for the last, 4 or so debt ceiling increases, have you noticed that it always comes with huge spending? Hey, we'll increase it, but you got to spend another $320 billion, right? Otherwise, right, we're going to shut down the whole government, and we're going to let let the cat out of the bag that we actually really can't pay for it, right? Because if you didn't increase the debt ceiling, right, we would end up defaulting because we don't have the money. We don't have the money, right? You're spending $1.7 trillion more than you take in. And right now, without it, right, we got about 6 months. We can pay about 6 months worth of bills, and that's about it, right? And then the federal government's emergency fund, which is really just playing with numbers on a spreadsheet, runs out, and then not enough revenue comes in to pay the bills. But when you see things happen like that, and you're like, wait a minute, shouldn't we have done the opposite? Right? Here's the debt ceiling again, guys. Hey, maybe we should cut $300 billion. Right? And, of course, here's the reason they can't. Most of this stuff, there's no discretionary spending by Congress is the smallest part of the budget. I mean, just Social Security, Medicare, right? You're talking there's a couple of $1 trillion just in those two programs. Defense is what, $750 billion. Interest on the debt, that's another $500 billion. And essentially, just those four items, and you've spent all of the tax revenue that is brought into the federal government on just those four items. So it's no wonder. What is the rest of the world doing? Buying gold. Russia today announced it's purchased another 18.67 tons of gold. And just so you know, a ton of gold is 32,150 ounces. So you're talking about 18.67 tons. That's like 6 million ounces of gold, and that's a month. And Russia does it every single month. By the way, their gold holdings now over 2,200 metric tons. In addition to Russia buying, the Chinese have been buying, the stands, Turkey, some country I can't even tell you the name. I don't even think it has any vials in it at all was buying. Kazakhstan was buying. Turkey was buying. Last year was the second highest level ever. This year it could be the highest level ever of central bank buying around the world. And I think it really has a lot to do with look at where our debts are at. Because right now, think about it. There's not a major war yet. Right? We'll see what happens with Iran. The economy's still growing. Has it slowed? Sure. It's still growing, right? Right? We're not in a recession. And yet, this year we're not going to hit the record, but it's going to be right next to the record. I think next year, we're going to set the record for the largest deficits ever. And, of course, really, if you took out, 2009 when we bailed out all the banks, right, that was, what was that number? Like almost $800 billion. So it's the only one that we haven't taken out yet. And now all of these countries are like, wait a minute. Usually how it had worked, and really you can only go back to 1971, was during the bad years, the debts went up. During the good years, right, the debt we'd still have debt, but that number would go down. And now, all of a sudden, Obama had some down, not because he did anything great. It was just from where we were, from all the bailouts and all that stuff. But the last several years of Obama, and now all the years of Trump, we've had an economy that, at least on paper, and quite honestly, in Phoenix, the economy's growing here. I mean, you can't argue. I mean, I know I just told you I went into PV Mall and it's completely empty, but they're building apartment complexes and things of that nature all around town. The deficits, they're not going up a little bit, right? Be one thing, okay, the debt, it went up 5%. We're seeing the deficits going up. First it was 10%, then it was 20%. Now we're looking at a deficit up 30%. And I think a lot of people out there are starting to worry about how much longer this fiat system is going to be in place. And I think that's why you're seeing all the gold buying, because it makes sense. Hey, wait a minute. This is still good times. The debt should be falling. It's skyrocketing. What would happen in a bad time? Great question.
This is the Phyllis Schlafly Report, a daily broadcast from Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, a national volunteer organization founded by Phyllis Schlafly and continuing to uphold her legacy by opposing radical feminism and representing a traditional conservative perspective in our nation's capital. And now, from the archives of Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, here is Phyllis Schlafly.
One of the big problems with family courts is that judges issue restraining orders virtually for the asking, without evidence of actual domestic violence or even threat of violence. The Illinois Bar Journal explained that women use these restraining orders as a tool for the mother to get child custody and to bar the father from visitation. The Journal proclaimed that these restraining orders have become the gamesmanship of divorce. The game is that mothers can assert falsehoods or trivial complaints against the father without presenting evidence and easily get a restraining order. The Fourth Amendment guarantees U.S. citizens the right to be secure in their persons, house, papers, and effects. But each year restraining orders are issued against at least 2 million men without proof or even evidence. Real domestic violence is easier to prove than most crimes because medical record and forensic evidence can be clear and convincing. However, it is difficult to disprove false allegations of non-serious domestic violence, so a higher standard of proof should be essential. Family courts have avoided facing up to whether these restraining orders issued against fathers are even constitutional. Feminists have persuaded judges to issue orders that restrain the actions of people who are not criminals but are mostly husbands and fathers and punish them based on flimsy, unproved accusations. Most states do not require any standard of proof, such as clear and convincing evidence. Even though these restraining orders are issued without due process required for criminal prosecutions, they still carry the threat of a prison sentence for anyone who violates them. Probably 2 million restraining orders are issued every year in domestic relationships. There is no evidence that they increase the overall safety of the women or the children.
This has been the Phyllis Schlafly Report from Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. The traditional family is the building block of our communities and country. That's why it's imperative to support strong marriages, respect fathers, and champion stay-at-home moms. At phyllisschlafly.com, we oppose the liberal attempt to redefine the family. To join us, visit phyllisschlafly.com. Thanks for listening, and join us again next time for the Phyllis Schlafly Report.
This is the Patriot Radio News Hour, and after the halfway break, just after Phyllis Schlafly Report, we had a bit of a technical difficulty, so we're going to pick up Joe and his insights already in progress.
According to everybody, right, and I think we are, that's going to put the Fed funds rate at essentially 2%, between 2 and 2.25%, right? The 10-year note's at 2%. If you have like $10,000 in a savings account, maybe they're giving you 0.5%. Even that's getting ready to go away. So from January 1st to December 31st, how did we do? 900, and I want to make sure I wrote it down here. Hold on, give me a second here. $986 billion in 1 year. That was 2018. $986 billion. Now, of course, the government, with their little weirdness, told us the number for their fiscal 18 was like $770 billion. Now think about this. If you take all expenditures and social welfare, that's your Social Security, your Medicaid, your food stamps, your housing assistance, and interest on the debt. That equaled in 2018 $3.36 trillion. We only took in $3.5 trillion in taxes. Right? So now, if you take all social welfare programs and the interest on the debt, you got everything. You got all the money. But now let's look at what they did. And you know what's so funny? When I was watching the idiot box, I didn't hear anyone really comment. They all thought, oh, hey, they're increasing the debt ceiling. Okay, yeah. Right? Because they get all worried when they don't, right? It's all a big game. They agreed to spend another $320 billion. I mean, that's what they agreed. Think about how crazy it is. And then on top of that, they didn't set a number. What they did is they set a date, right? 2 years. We won't have another talk about the debt ceiling until July of 2021. Right? And you hear all these people out there, too, that say, we should just get rid of the debt ceiling thing. Right? Just get rid of it. Sure. Right? But think about what that meant, though. Now they can spend whatever they want for 2 years. Right? Sure, 320, no problem. Hey, you want to do another 320 next year? Sure. Why not? Because there's no number on it. These numbers are so big, let's not even put a number on it, right? That way, hey, we can spend what we want and not worry about it. So 986, okay? Now let's pretend that nothing costs more next year, okay? Social Security, even though 10,000 people a day are retired, let's pretend that Social Security doesn't go up, Medicare doesn't go up, interest on the debt, nothing goes up. 986, let's just round up, shall we? Let's call it $1 trillion. And like I said, that doesn't include anything else. And, of course, they've already agreed to spend a bunch more money on a bunch of other stuff. And now I'm thinking if the tax revenue, let's just say tax revenues, which have been falling, let's say they fall a little more. Let's say we fall, $100 billion more dollars. That's $1.4 trillion. And now, according to the number, by this 2021, the actual real deficit will exceed $2 trillion a year. Gee, I wonder who told you that. Oh, yeah, the bald-headed fat guy that does this show. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be back after the break. 800-951-0592. Just the federal government alone, we're approaching $5 trillion of spending. How did the federal government all of a sudden become, 25% of all GDP? And then think about all the other governments, the cities and the state governments and all that. I mean, government now is like a huge part of gross domestic product, isn't it? I mean, it was never supposed to be this way. No wonder why we're going broke. And then they just approved $320 billion. No one says a word. Crazy. $320 billion. You're running a $1 trillion deficit. Yeah, and really, we know that's not even the real number, right? Your fake number, your seasonally adjusted fake trillion, and your solution when it comes time, oh, man, we got to have this debt discussion. I know. I wonder what Brainiac thought about it. Hey, I got a great idea. Nancy and Chuck, right? Because, the Republicans, they just want them to lift it, so the Democrats are going to tell them, let's add another 320. Here's the funny part. They just passed a bill in the House. It won't pass the Senate, but they just passed a bill in the House. They want to bail out the already bailed out pensions for a bunch of truckers and nurses and all these pension funds are starting to all go bust. Right? And we've talked a lot about it, but it's starting to head. Congress, they just passed on for more. I'm thinking, wait, the 320 didn't include anything for that? No. Early this year, Moody's said unfunded pension liabilities amounted to $4.4 trillion. Guess what? We got a new number. And it's, and I know, we're up, blah, 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 year to date. And, of course, year over year, because of the December thing. The Dow's up a little bit. I don't know, 5%, 4%, 6%, 7%. And if you actually go year to date, right, it's up, 9%? Maybe it's 8%. Not a bad year, right? The pension should be doing a little better. Apparently, they're doing even worse. They're now saying, like I said, it was 4.4. The new estimate now is $6 trillion. And I'm going to tell you, neither one of those numbers is right. And now you're sitting there going, wait a minute. I may be way underestimating this thing. I keep telling you in 10 years it's going to be, probably 10 years now it's probably $50 trillion. But 2 years ago I was saying in 10 years the debt's going to be $40 trillion. And, of course, the CBO estimates it's only going to be $33 trillion. Like that's somehow better, right? And it's all full of garbage, right? They totally right? Well, put it this way. The CBO didn't have this $320 billion in its calculation every year, right? Add that up. $320 billion times 10, that's another $3.2 trillion. Throw that on there. Wait, then you got to pay the interest on that. So, add a couple $100 billion more for that. Right, wait, and then you got to pay for this. I didn't even, factor in bailing out pensions. What if we have to pay out $6 trillion? And here's the problem: is these numbers go up like $1 trillion seemingly every 6 to 8 months now. Right? It just keeps getting worse. We've had how many years of expansion? Who was it? Kennedy, right? Kennedy, right? The time to fix a leaking roof is when the sun is shining. Here's what happened: we had the sun shining allegedly, right? Because let's face it, we fixed it with debt, and things got worse. Right? All of these numbers are huge. What would happen if in 5 years it went up $20 trillion? I know you're like, oh, come on, that's crazy, is it? Did you really think? I remember when I started working here. A $320 billion deficit was huge. Now we just, in order to pass a bill, let's add $320 billion. It's absolute nonsense if you think this is going to work. Why is it that this economy, even though by all means, hey, it's doing okay, doesn't feel that great? It really doesn't, does it? It's okay. Doesn't feel that great. Right? Record homeless and all this other stuff. Why is it? Right? We're spending 1.6, $1.7 trillion more than we're taking in. This economy should feel super good. And now they're saying, Atlanta Fed saying 1.3 GDP, and the second quarter is usually the best quarter of the year. Now, granted, their funny business didn't help. I got one place I'd tell you I think I know. Have you seen the size of the debt? Maybe that's what it is. Patriot Radio News Hour, final segment coming up. 800-951-0592. It's going to be interesting. Dow's down a couple hundred now. Matter of fact, S&P just broke below 3,000. The Dow 70 points away from breaking back below 27,000. Economic data this whole week wasn't good, right? So home, existing home, new home, durable good, manufacturing reports, all that stuff, trade deficits, not great. Gold's down 7, right? I'm not surprised by that. Everyone's going to hedge their bets. I guess everyone's going to wait. How low is the number going to be? Right? And I think, and I know it sounds weird, but this is, I guess, bad news is good, right? The lower, the better. Could that be? I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking, right? I think that people won't be that excited if the number's over 2%, right? And I'll say this: no one thinks 3, 4. That's gone. But like I said, Atlanta's down to 1.3. I think consensus is like 1.7, 1.8. So we'll have to see there. And then remember, we got the Fed, right? So Friday GDP. Tuesday, Wednesday, we got the Fed meeting with the expected rate cut announcement that is supposed to be coming. So a lot of people just, I think right now, sitting on the sidelines. And that's what I think. Let's wait for tomorrow. I'm working on a good special for tomorrow. Let's see what happens with this GDP number. I think the lower it is, that's just my opinion, the lower it is, the better the reaction will be. Okay, right? Let's cut rates again, which is crazy. Who would think that way? This is how you got to think now. Hey, I need the economy to be a little worse so the Fed can go back to zero. That doesn't make economic sense. You know that doesn't make sense. Right? It's like raise the debt limit by adding another $320 billion on debt. That makes no sense, right? Makes no sense. All of these things make no sense, and I think that's why you're seeing, right? All the central banks around the world, they're all buying gold. If they're not in the basket, China is in the basket and they buy. The other countries in the basket of currencies, right? The euro, the dollar, the pound, right? The yen, they're not buying. Right? They're not buying. Because if they were buying, oh my God, that'd be the worst day ever, right? Everybody else is buying because they're like, well, wait, here's my choices. I could buy dollars. I could buy euros. I could buy yen. I could buy pound sterling. You know what? I don't want to buy any of those. Because look at their debt. Look at their debt. Look at their debt. Look at what their central bank is saying. Look at what their central bank is saying. Look at what their central bank. All these central banks of these countries I just mentioned are all saying what? More rate cuts, quantitative easing, and tools in the toolkits, and all this other stuff. And they're saying, you know what? I think more gold sounds about right, and that's how you should be looking at it as well. 800-951-0592. Tomorrow it's going to be all about GDP. We'll see what the number is. Patriot Radio News Hour. Everyone have a great rest of your Thursday. We'll get the jack out tomorrow.